Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy, Gsluke, here with our Thursday night football preview between the Broncos and the Chiefs. Gonna take a look at the prop and the DFS side of things, and make sure you're ready to go out there and have yourself a night. So for DFS, gonna take a look at some of the ownership, some of the projections for tonight that are especially notable, and a few ways you can attack large field GPPs. And then towards the end of this preview, about the last 5-6 minutes, we're gonna go through some of the prop side of things. So over there in Underdog and on Prize Picks, a few of the props that I have my eye on for tonight's game that you might want to get some exposure to yourself. So a lot to get into. It's going to be maybe not the most entertaining game, right? A whole 10-point spread, but still one that we can hopefully make some money on. For the DFS side of things, it's a slate that I think is a little bit interesting and one that maybe isn't as straightforward as some might think, because tonight we do have that 10.5-point spread. Almost everyone's going to be drawn towards the Chief onslaught lineups, but even if you agree with the Vegas sentiment, right, a lot of the bettors out there, unfortunately pulling off a Chief stack is a lot easier said than done. Not only do you have just a plethora of options to choose from, even picking whether it's going to be a passing first script or a rushing first script is a whole question of its own. So I know the Chiefs tonight, right, going to be popular, but even if you agree with that, like, good luck going out there and getting the perfect combination. So in large field GPPs, what I think is a lot more intriguing is going to the Broncos side of things. And this is really for the largest field of contest, because first off, they're a lot easier to stack, a little bit more predictable, with a lot less options over there on offense. And furthermore, they're lower owned, they're lower priced, they're better values in terms of their price tag. And in those large field contests, right, where we're looking for that game theory advantage, that's exactly how you can generate it. So in the large field contest tonight, it is not going to feel great. I do agree with the Vegas line of about a 10.5-point spread, but I do know that the Broncos side is going to be underutilized and that there's likely going to be an edge to be exploited. I also know that the Chief stacks are just going to be hard to pull off. So hopefully, some of my 3-3 lineups, my 4-2 Broncos stacks could potentially get there even if the Chiefs win. So that's how I'm attacking the larger field GPPs. If I was going to play like a single entry or a cash contest, which for tonight I'm probably going to avoid, I might consider like a 4-2 Chiefs stack, but even that is hard to put together, right? You could take Mahomes, right? You have Kelce, who's a little bit injured tonight. We'll talk about that here in a second. So it's not as straightforward as it would be for most Chiefs primetime slates. So a few things to note. Talked about Kelce a second ago. He is questionable for tonight. I'm expected to suit it up, but we don't know what kind of limitation he's going to have. So the ownership is pretty high right now. We have him close to 50% at flex, about 65% total ownership between flex and captain, which is pretty typical of what we see from a Kelce, right? He's expensive. He's a whole $11,000. And given the fact that he's not 100% healthy, I think that's a little questionable, right? The fact that he's going to be 65% owned at that price tag just feels a little bit steep to me. So just another reason to maybe consider that Broncos side of things, because Russell Wilson, for example, has a lot less question marks around him. He's significantly cheaper than Travis Kelce, and also comes in at lower ownership too. So it's just, I see the Broncos side of things and I see all this value, and it just makes it really hard to avoid going in that direction. A lot of people that stack the Chiefs, right, that go with some of the onslaught scripts are going to take Isaiah Pacheco as their captain, which I would agree with, but even then it's hard to get some of the Chiefs players along with them. On top of the relatively wide spread, right, a 10.5-point spread, it's going to be relatively gusty down there in Kansas City. They have gusts in the 15 to 25 mile an hour range, which is going to impact play a bit, especially when it comes to the passing and the kicking games, but I think it's being a little bit overblown. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter talking about how they expect the teams to go out there and pound the rock, and while I think maybe they run a little bit more than usual tonight, I'm not sure it's going to be this massive impact like people are expecting, right? It's the games with constant rain, right, that are more so worrisome. It's the games where you have like 30-40 mile an hour winds where people aren't able to drive it well down the field. You get that in Buffalo sometimes. Chicago, right, infamous for having those windy games. Not so much over here in Arrowhead, right? I know it's out there in the plains. They get their fair share of winds, but it's 15 to 25 miles an hour tonight, right? They're playing golf over in Las Vegas right now in worse conditions than that. So I get the running narrative. I get people trying to get to Pacheco out there. I just think it might be a little bit overblown, right? People are looking a little bit too much into the weather. And I'm not saying that Mahomes is going to go out there and throw for 400 yards, but, I wouldn't be surprised to see some down the field throws, right? 20, 30 yards down the field. Maybe you're not going to see those Hail Mary type of plays, but I don't think these guys are going to be extremely handicapped by any means. The kickers might be a little bit more worried about. So Harrison Butker, also Will Lutz, the starting kickers tonight, might have a little bit more trouble as the wind will impact them. But in terms of your passing games, especially some of the shorter targets, right, slot wide receivers, players that are like running backs out of the backfield, I would expect zero to little impact on those sort of guys. In terms of other injuries, we do have a potential player returning in Greg Dulcich. As of right now, he's still technically on the IR, but could be activated at any second at this point. If so, he's going to be the number one tight end ahead of an Adam Troutman. But again, that snap share, right, how much he's actually going to play would be a huge question mark even if he's activated. So we'll have to see what kind of report we get on Dulcich, right? Whether we get, some sort of a snap share or a snap load, right, that we're going to get for Greg out there. But a high upside tight end that is infinitely more, infinitely more involved in the offense than Adam Troutman, right? Troutman, much more of a blocker, a little bit of a stiff out there at his age, whereas Greg Dulcich, athletic tight end, right, has yards after catch kind of ability. Now, he's not an elite guy like a Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, right? Let's not go crazy about it, but he's like a league average tight end, right, compared to somebody that's a borderline even, rostered tight end in the NFL. So it's only a $400 difference if both of them are active tonight. Even with a smaller snap share, I probably lean towards Greg Dulcich. In terms of stacking the Broncos, so, if you're going to go with the Chiefs side, good luck, because you have all these different wide receivers to choose from. You got Rice, who's the most expensive, but Sky Moore, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, Kadarius Toney mixed in. Even some of the really cheap options like a Justin Watson, Justin Ross are both going to play quite a bit tonight. So you're just, out of those 5-6 wide receivers, you got to figure out which two are going to score tonight, and it's really just a lotto at that point. So if you're going to invest all of your lineups into Chief stacks, maybe you can cover enough outcomes, to get that winning lineup tonight. But even if you're all in on the Chiefs tonight, let's say you're going all 4-2 Chiefs or all 5-1 Chief stacks, I can just tell you from experience, because I've done this with the Chiefs before, it is a lot easier said than done getting that combination correct, especially when there's like 6-7 guys, including the running backs that you can choose from as a stack. Over here in the Broncos, though, what I was kind of using this as a segue for, is that the Broncos are a lot more predictable, right? Jerry Jeudy's your number one wide receiver, does have a few trade concerns around him right now, so we'll have to see if they decide to maybe increase his workload, right, to maybe make him a little bit more valuable before the trade deadline, or perhaps maybe play him a little bit less to protect him from injury. I could see either one of those narratives playing out. So Jerry Jeudy, their number one. You have Cortland Sutton, who's their number two wide receiver. Perhaps if somebody like Jerry Jeudy doesn't play as much, you have somebody like Marvin Mims play a little bit more on the outside. Really, outside of those three, those are your main three wide receivers. You're going to have potentially Dulcich at tight end. We have Adam Troutman, right, that clear number two tight end. And then at running back, if you're looking for a rushing threat, it's Javonte Williams, right? McLaughlin was priced up, assuming that Williams might sit. So obviously, in terms of points per dollar, he's not the best play there. But Samaje Perine's still relatively cheap, right? He's only $5,000. And if you think they're going to be a little bit more passing heavy, you probably go with Perine, right? You hope that he's getting that third down work, maybe getting a receiving touchdown to get to that ceiling performance. Whereas Williams, you might want to play in a heavy Broncos stack, right? If you have any 5-1s, which would be extremely daring tonight. Most of my Bronco stacks, right, when I say that, are going to be 4-2 stacks, right, where there's a Bronco at captain, right, 2 buybacks there on the Chiefs. One of them's probably going to be Mahomes in terms of the buybacks. If you went 5-1, if you were that crazy about it, which I've seen crazier things hit before in large field GPPs, Williams is a great captain and a great player to include in those kind of lineups. Now, a few concerns with Williams. He's returning from injury, right? Did not suit up there on Sunday. So we have to be a little bit concerned with his workload, right? Whether he's going to be at 100% capacity. It's why I'm still projecting McLaughlin for 5.6 points. I do think that he's going to get quite a bit of work tonight, right? As that number 2 running back. And he earned it last week. He had a great week, right? He was very efficient. I think he earned some snaps on that offense, and I'm assuming that we're going to see that tonight. And then with Samaje Perine, right, I've got him projected for even more points, right, 6.2 points there. A lot of that is the third down work, right, the work out of the backfield as a wide receiver. And with Joe Burrow last year, right, completely different offense, right, different level when it comes to the quarterback. But he had that game with like 40 fantasy points, right? And that was with Joe Mixon active, I believe. So $5,000, he has more than a path to get there, especially if you can get into the end zone. If you're going to play a Chiefs stack, the defense, I think, is a great option at flex tonight. I would probably avoid the kickers, like I was saying before. The wins don't look that great for it. If I have to say, if you think that the winds aren't going to be a huge factor, right? Let's say that you assume like the 15 to 25 miles an hour is a little bit overblown, which I think there's a little bit of credence to that. Just want to point that out, right? If you think that's going to be a thing, the kickers are going to be under-owned, right? I know I've got them at 26% right here. I've got Will Lutz at 15.1% in terms of projected ownership at flex. But normally, right, Butker would be like 35% owned, right? Especially on an onslaught type of night. Right, Will Lutz, right, would typically be at least 20% owned, right? People play the kickers quite often. Tonight he's 15% owned, right? So in both circumstances, you're getting a little bit of a price decrease. So I don't love the kickers. I'm actually not sure if I'm going to play them. A lot of that's going to depend on the weather, right? Especially when we get closer to lock. But you're going to be getting them at lower ownership. I can tell you that much. In terms of your Chiefs wide receivers, especially the cheaper ones down here, Kadarius Toney, MVS bring exceptional value to the table. I think that Justin Watson and Justin Ross are also just as live. So unfortunately, right, I like all these Chiefs wide receivers pretty much on the same level, right? There's not really one that stands out amongst the rest. Right? Justin Watson, really good at getting those 30, 40-yard catches, is probably the best deep threat on that team, which is kind of sad, honestly, if Justin Watson's your best deep threat. And then Justin Ross down here has seemingly gone a little bit more chemistry with the offense over the last few weeks. He's also only $600. I like them just as much as these MVSs, the Kadarius Tonys of the world. It just makes it so tough to stack that offense, right? I don't really have any hot takes, right? When it comes to the Chiefs offense, it's just kind of whoever gets that target in the red zone is the guy that you're going to have in your lineup. So that's why I'm going with the Broncos, kind of mixing, matching from the Chiefs in terms of buybacks. And that's how I'm handling the DFS side of things tonight. All right, and now for the prop side of things, where I'm not being quite as ambitious, let's say, as I am over there for GPPs. So for your prop side of things, you want to be betting on the Vegas script, right? You don't want to be taking a Broncos heavy script. If you do, right, make it like a 5-6 man parlay, right? Really go for the bank if you're going to go in that direction. But I think the Chiefs winning tonight, right, the Chiefs controlling the game is something that is more than reasonable to expect. And if we're in that sort of script, both of these props over there in Underdog make quite a bit of sense. So first off, Patty Mahomes is juiced -140 under this line. Makes a lot of sense considering they're expected to be playing from ahead. And if that's going to be the case, well, he's not going to have to throw the ball like 30, 40 times, right? You're going to see a lot of Pacheco, some of the guys like CEH, also potentially Jerick McKinnon getting some of the workload. And the Vegas odds reflect that this is a solid value. And if you go over to FanDuel, I believe he's also at this line. I believe it was just a little bit less. I think it was like -138 or something along those lines, but still solid value in our direction. And on top of that, right, the second prop that we're taking here is also correlated with that same kind of script. So it's an under on Javonte Williams rushing yards. A few reasons for that. I mean, first off, he's at 35.5 on FanDuel, 35.5 on Draftkings as well. And at that projection was juiced -130 on Draftkings at the 35.5 mark, right? So an entire rushing yard lower and juiced in our direction. And if the Broncos Broncos are going to be playing from behind, Williams isn't going to see the ball as much, right? He's not going to be playing as much. You'll have Pirine in there, McLaughlin, a little bit more of a speedster, probably playing out of the backfield as a wide receiver instead of a banged up, a little bit of a question mark, right, in terms of the workload with Williams. So I know, right, GPPs, right, we're taking more of a bold stand for tonight, but when you're playing the prop side of things, right, you want to take advantage of the common sentiment, right, especially when it's a 10-point spread like what we have out there. Now, this was going to be a three-man card. They had Kadarius Toney at 30.5 receiving yards. Unfortunately, just before I hit record, that got bumped down to 28.5. He was minus 150 at 29.5 yards. So that was definitely a misprice, right? We had the one discrepancy there in terms of the yards and the minus 150 juice. So if that one goes back up, maybe he'll get bumped back up to 30.5 yards. We've seen that happen. Feel free to go ahead and throw that one in there too, right? Obviously, if Mahomes is going to throw the ball a little bit less, well, Kadarius Toney is less likely to cover that kind of receiving yard line. So that's what I was thinking over here in Underdog, and one of the few pieces of early exposure that I got to. Speaking of with Kadarius Toney, well, you can still take him over there on Prize Picks at this 29.5 mark. So not the 30.5 that he was up there on Underdog, but still solid value with a minus 150 juice towards the under. And then also not the same value on Javonte Williams, but once again, he was minus 130 at this projection on Draftkings. So you're still getting a plus EV play there. So another correlated slip, right? This under on Toney, maybe not as correlated with Javonte Williams as what we were dealing with the Mahomes prop before, but still a solid pairing that I'd be willing to enter over there on Prize Picks. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for the Thursday Night Football preview. Best of luck with all of your props and all your DFS lineups for this evening. Go out there, take home a GPP for me, and also go ahead and cash out on those slips. I'm looking forward to it. Should be a fun affair, whether it's close, whether it's a little bit more of a blowout. There should be some sort of exposure for us that we can profit off of, and again, make it one to remember. So looking forward to it. Appreciate the support here on the channel. Go ahead, smash that like button on the way out of here, and also go ahead and comment down below who you've got as your top captain play on the slate for a chance to win a free month of my Patreon. On my Patreon is where you can get access to all of my projections that you see in my videos, all of my prop exposure I'm taking, whether it's for golf or for football, and all the different projection sheets that I'm using in my content. That includes the player pool stuff that's blacked out, all of the different script notes for every player on Showdown. They give you an idea of not only who I'm playing on any given slate, but also how I'm using them in my lineups. So a good research tool, right? If you've been wondering about that, well, first off, enter the drawing for a free month, and then also make sure you go out there and join the Patreon for all of that access yourself. Appreciate the support here, guys. Best of luck with those lineups tonight, and let's go out there and have ourselves an evening.